guys, today we're going to be doing a review on this guy right here. This is the T.Rex Arms offset mount. This one here is specifically for a Trichicon RMR or a Holosun, and currently I've been using this optic right here. It's a Holosun 407. This is the A3 model. It has no solar panel on top, and it was just a Black Friday deal that Palmetto had a year or two ago. I don't remember how long ago that was, but I went ahead and bought one just because I liked how it looked, and it was so cheap. It was like 175 bucks. But anyway, so that's what I've been using on this, and I've been testing out two different ways of mounting a micro red dot on my rifle. One is right here on top of my scope, and I've pretty much found that with body armor, I absolutely hate that method. Without body armor, I might like it a little bit better. So if you are wearing body armor all the time, either for work or whatever, this may not be an option for you. You might like it, I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. But if you're wearing body armor, I would suggest getting one of these. If you are not wearing body armor, this one might be better because this doesn't block your view as much. So, and I'll get right into that, kind of one of the negatives of this mount. And I'll go ahead and mount it up there so you can see what it looks like. This is, hopefully you can see, this is how it mounts. It clamps right on the rail, uses 2 Torx screws, which is fine. It'll mount, hopefully the camera will focus. There it goes. So it'll mount right on the side wherever you want it, and you can mount it pretty well right underneath. This is a Burris P.E.P.R QD mount. I don't even know if they still make this anymore, but you can get it really close under there. The only downside is you have to mount this pretty much on your handguard. With this specific one, unless you want to get rid of your iron sights and move stuff back, then you might have space for it, but that is one negative. So I'll go ahead and show you all the parts that come in here and how it goes together, and then I'll put everything back on here so you can see what it looks like. Alright, so this background is something new I'm trying. If y'all like it, just let me know. Or if you have any ideas for something I can do better, let me know. This is just a couple flags I had hanging around, so I figured it makes a decent backdrop. But one of the things I may not have mentioned yet already or not, but this is there's a couple different ways you can mount a small red dot on top with a scope or an LPVO, or you can mount it on the side, you know, like this T.Rex Arms offset mount. And I tried it both ways to see which I liked best. But whenever you mount it on top, one thing to know is if your turrets are really tall on your LPVO, or if you put on a scope or something like that, you may not be able to see over the top of it, so that's a consideration. This is a Burris, it's a P.E.P.R mount, as you can see on here. It's got a QD system on there. You can take it on and off, and also these top rings are switchable with Picatinny mounts, so you can take out this smooth one and put a pick rail on there if you want, and it comes with 2 of each, so you can, you know, put whatever you want on there. So that's what I mounted it on. I really like this whenever I'm not wearing body armor because I can see over the top of the entire rifle. It just looks like I'm looking down a regular red dot. Now granted, I don't have as good of a cheek weld. I have, as you can see, more of a chin weld, which is not a big deal. Normally I'd be down here. That gives you a little bit less stability. Again, I'm not wearing body armor right now. But something we've discovered, and me and Rhett both felt this way about it, is whenever you're wearing body armor, you don't get as good as a... You can't put the stock in your shoulder as well as you normally could because body armor kind of gets in the way of things. And so whenever you have that, and maybe I'll demonstrate this, maybe I won't, but whenever you can't get the shoulder in your stock perfectly like you would normally whenever you're not wearing body armor, then you can't get a good chin weld or a good cheek weld like you would like to. The dot is almost kind of floating around out in front of you, and it's hard to stabilize your shots as easily. So up close, it's not really a big deal. I guess if you're doing CQB stuff, you know, sure, you can just make it work. But it almost feels like if your AR didn't have a stock on it at all and you're just kind of holding it out in front of you, that's kind of what it felt like. Now, one thing I will mention specifically with this scope, and again, this is a primary arms. It's their 1:6. It's a second focal plane scope. I like it. It's got the ACSS, too many C's, ACSS, again, you can see it right there, reticle in here, and I like the reticle okay. It's good for distance. I don't really like it for up close, so personally I wouldn't use this scope for up close distances. 50 yards and out, yeah, I would probably use it, but anything inside of that I'd probably just go to the red dot. But it comes with caps for the turrets, and as you can see on here, they're removable and you can switch either side. And if you notice on here. Hopefully you can see that. One's bigger than the other, and that's because it holds an extra. This one holds a battery in the top for storage. And with this scope, you're going to want to keep an extra battery in there because the battery life is kind of trash. But you can swap these out, and wherever you put this red dot on here, you're going to want to put the smaller cap. So whenever I have the red dot on the TRex Arms mount, I move the shorter cap over to the side because this big fat one actually covers up some of the red dot and you can't see it as well whenever it's off to the side. So, but whenever it's on top, I put the shorter one up top, obviously, so it doesn't obstruct my view. So one other difference between these two mounts is going to be kind of whenever you're shooting from awkward positions. I'll try to insert some clips here. I honestly don't remember if I got footage of me utilizing this or this from barricades or anything like that. But whenever you are shooting from barricades, whenever you don't have a good cheek weld or you can't get behind the rifle as well, like from right here, your head's higher. So if you're trying to shoot, say, underneath things or around things or through small like holes in the barricade or whatever, it's more difficult to see your target because this is so high up. So say if you have a hole that, you know, is only about this tall, this optic might actually be looking at wood instead of your beyond. Now you can kind of angle it, you know, kind of get through there, but just know that because it's such a high optic, shooting from unorthodox positions is going to be a little bit more difficult. Versus whenever you have it on the TRex Arms mount, as soon as you flip it off to the side, you're still kind of in bore and you can still get a good cheek weld, just like this to look through there. So your face is closer to where the barrel is actually poking through or shooting through, depending on what you're shooting around. So the advantage, again, for shooting in awkward positions is definitely not this mount. It would be something like this TRex Arms mount. Just to show you a comparison of how low your face can get and how good of a cheek weld you can get or not get, depending on what you're using. This would be a normal cheek weld if I'm looking through the optic, which I'll go ahead and demonstrate. So here I'm aiming directly at the camera. That's a good solid cheek weld, you know, if I want to see clamp out there. Now, in order to get a cheek weld on the red dot on top, this is what it looks like. So hopefully you can see that's my cheek weld versus that's my cheek weld. So it just depends on what you're comfortable with, to be honest. And then also with Ear Pro, and I may have mentioned this already, but if you're wearing Ear Pro like Howard Lights or Ear Pro that's kind of bigger or goes farther down on your head, you know, farther down here, you're going to have a hard time getting a cheek weld on a lower optic, but up here you'll be just fine. Versus whenever you're using this canted sight on the TRex Arms, the Ear Pro might get in the way whenever you're using this one here. So that is an advantage for this one right here, is if you got a helmet mounted Ear Pro or regular Ear Pro that come farther down than you would like, this would be easier to aim with because you're not trying to really scrunch that Ear Pro out of the way. So one thing I will mention is it does come with the spacer plate. So here is the regular height plate, and then you can put this plate right on top if you want to. It'll fit right there, and that just adds it. It's just a spacer plate. It makes it stick out further. So if you have a turret or something on the side that sticks out a little bit further and you need a little bit more clearance, you can add this on there and get it just a little bit higher. So that is nice. Alright, so if I haven't mentioned, this thing retails for around $80, and I had to wait forever for it to come in stock, but as of last few times I've checked, I think they have it in stock pretty much all the time now, and they make it for multiple different red dot options. Something I can't stress enough with this mount is it gets the optic so close, or it gets the red dot so close to your regular optic, to your LPVO, that it really doesn't stick out all that much. So as you can tell from the top, I mean, it sticks out some, but see, there's your forward assist. I would say it sticks out maybe another ½ inch past where the forward assist sticks out. So about, yeah, probably about ½ an inch. So it's not that big of a deal. You can see it perfectly from right on top. It sticks out about another ½ inch, maybe an inch at the most. All right, hopefully if I can get this on camera, you'll be able to see what it looks like kind of from the shooter's perspective. So there is your dot. You can kind of see how much it sticks out. And if you use the larger cap right here, if you use this cap on this side, you can tell it would kind of be in the way whenever you're trying to aim. So that's what it looks like off the side. You can see it's very, very close to your scope. When you have it on here, you can see I can actually still get a very, very good cheek weld. So before, again, I was up here, versus whenever it's mounted on the side, I can actually rotate from side to side, and it's that quick. I'll aim at the camera so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm aiming directly at the camera, still at the camera. You can see how quick that is. So again, I'm left eye dominant, so maybe it has something to do with that. Maybe I'm just weird again. But whenever I'm aiming through the scope, I don't like using it on 1X because I tend to get tunnel vision with the scope, And I know in theory you should be able to use this like a red dot, and you kind of can, but you still kind of get that tube tunnel effect with something like this. So I don't like this as much for CQB, you know, like inside of a building structure type thing. Past 25 yards, I think this is better than the red dot. But inside of 25 yards, I like the red dot. So that's why I have the option on there. You could also use this as backup iron sights if you so chose. Again, something could break on your main optic, and so this would give you a backup. You could still run iron sights on there if you want to, that's fine, it's up to you. But you could look at it as a backup optic as well as just something that's quick and easy to switch to. One other thing too, another reason you might want to consider getting this type of mount is whenever you're shooting from awkward positions, and again I mentioned this earlier, whenever you're shooting from awkward positions, it's hard to get a good, there's a smaller eye box on scopes like this. So while the eye box is pretty forgiving, I can still see through it about to there, but if I move my head at all, it's off. About here, I get a little bit of movement side to side. Once I get a good cheek weld, I can move around and still see fairly well. But if you ever shot from behind barricades or underneath vehicles or anything like that, you know that having a very forgiving eye box is very important, because you're not always going to be able to get a good cheek weld. If you're going to be able to get a cheek weld at all, you might actually have to hold your gun out kind of off to the side just to be able to get a shot, and your face won't be touching it at all. Personal experience.
Okay, I don't like it for this. I can't even see the reticle. Come on. All the way sideways.
Having this off to the side here gives me a very large eye box, and again, I can hold it out as far as I want. I can still see that dot. So I mean, if I had to, for whatever reason, I could take a shot from out here, not even holding it, I can still see the dot. So that's an advantage of the red dot off to the side. If you're going to get one like this, this would be the one I'd recommend, because it sucks in the optic closer to the rifle, so it's just better pretty much all around. It doesn't stick out as far. If you didn't want to get a setup like this, which personally, I'm not a big fan of the LPVO with an offset red dot. I just don't like the LPVO for most rifles, at least for a 16-inch barrel AR for my purposes. I'd much rather have something like this. So this is my, again, another 16-inch barrel, but this one just has an Eotech. This is the EXPS-2, then I just have a Holosun Magnifier on the side. It still has the lens caps on it. But realistically, an engagement distance for me, for probably most of you, is 300 yards and in, and that's stretching it. At that point, can you identify who you're shooting at? What situation would you be shooting at? And if you're military or something, okay, I get it. You want to be able to shoot farther out, but most people, if they're shooting past 50 yards, I mean, can you identify your target at that point? Can you see what they have in their hands? All that takes into account. So really the magnification for me is just for target identification, but then at that point, you're pointing a gun at somebody that you haven't identified yet. Now you run into legal issues. So from a realistic standpoint, I think something like this is much more practical, especially when you take into consideration the limitations on range when it comes to the 5.56 caliber. Yeah, you can get a 1 to 10 scope. I know a lot of the general rule of thumb out there is you want 1 power magnification for every 100 yards. More than that is, I guess, fine, but I mean, you're not really going to stretch out there and still get good ballistics out of the 5.56 round, especially out of shorter barrels, but even out of a 16-inch barrel, really past 500 yards, and 3 to 4 power magnification is enough to shoot at that distance. I shoot steel targets all the time, out at 300 yards with this setup right here, and again, this is a 3X magnifier, and I can hit pretty much all day. All right, so I almost went off and didn't mention the biggest con of this type setup. So my biggest issue with this specific setup right here, with the offset red dot and this kind of LPVO, is even without the lens caps, and I'll chuck those off to the side, when you're aiming off to the side, I don't know if you can tell or not, but this entire scope is pretty much blocking everything my right eye can see. So if I close my right eye, I can see everything to the right of the gun just fine, but I can't see anything to the left. I'm aiming here and I close my right eye, my left eye can't see anything in front of me. So there's probably about a 10-degree angle kind of in front of me and just slightly to the left that I can't see anything from here down. So is that a big deal? Maybe. I don't know. If you're aiming at somebody directly in front of you and you have to fall into the ground, it's not a big deal. But if you're aiming here, this whole rifle, scope, everything blocks pretty much an entire silhouetted person. So if someone's standing off at, say, 10 yards away from me or closer, even a little bit farther away, what I can see through this window is going to be the only thing I can see from them. Because normally with a red dot sight, and I'll show you here, normally with a red dot sight, whenever you have the dot on somebody, this whole area over here is clear. So my left eye is actually seeing the target. My right eye is seeing the target. It just so happens the red dot's in the way of my right eye, so that's why I see the dot. But when I'm aiming on there, I can see the entire person because this doesn't block my view because there's nothing off to the side. All I see is through the window. My left eye is unobscured and I can see the person. Versus, again, something like this, if you think of a comparison, whenever I'm off to the side, I don't know, you can see how much of this blocks my face. I really can't see the person well. Is that a big deal? Maybe. If you're a cop and you're using something like this and you have the target, you know, at gunpoint and you can't see their hands or what their lower half of their body is doing, you can't see what they're doing with their pockets because your gun's blocking them, that's bad. If it's just a home defense situation, maybe it's not that big of a deal. If it's out, you know, in the middle of nowhere and you're shooting at distance, maybe it's not a big deal, but that is something to take notice of. And the main reason why I don't like this kind of setup in general, I liked it mounted on top because it didn't block my view, but then again, all the other problems I mentioned kind of came into the forefront. So I still prefer the red dot magnifier because it doesn't have all those limitations. Now, that said, a setup like this gives you the option to shoot at farther distances more accurately, and it allows you to identify your targets better at distance. So that's the advantage of this. And I will say it is easier to make hits on targets at distance and even up closer with more magnification. So that's just something to take note when you're not standing. So when you're standing up and you're aiming, you're going to notice that movement a whole lot more. So that's psychological. But anyways, I thought I would mention that. Now, one other thing I'll mention too with this type setup over, say, something like a magnifier or even with the top mounted red dot, it is significantly faster. Everybody online loves talking about speed, and speed is important. I don't think it's the most important thing, or you can't miss fast enough to win a gunfight. No matter how many rounds you fire at them, how quickly, you can fire 40 rounds at somebody, but if they don't hit them, it's not really going to do a whole lot. I might scare them, but you know, missing doesn't end gunfights. So speed does matter, but I think it's kind of blown out of proportion. But one nice thing about this is while you're aiming, it is significantly faster to acquire that dot, switching from one to the other. So if you're going from longer range and all of a sudden you need to go up close, it gives you a pretty good quick way to aim, versus if you're coming up top and you try to come up top, I mean, yeah, it's still fast, but your chin doesn't have anywhere to stop. Versus here, all you're doing is rotating the gun, your cheek weld stays the same, versus you're trying to move your chin and your eyes to line up everything all at the same time, so it's just a little bit slower. It's not that much slower, but it is noticeable. So again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment down below. If you think I'm wrong on something, put it down below, that's fine. I'm wrong on a lot of things. Go ahead and subscribe if you like this kind of content. We try to give you practical information after utilizing stuff, so we don't just pop out videos saying, hey, I've had this for 5 minutes and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We actually use this stuff. If you have any suggestions on what I can do with the background behind me, let me know. If you like this, let me know. Again, hopefully y'all enjoyed this video and found it useful. Again, this is the TRex Arms offset mount. Have a good one.